On October 17th, 2017, EA shut down Visceral Game Studios. Visceral Games had a rich history of games I thoroughly enjoyed, whether it was creating great adaptations from some really awesome movies, or creating new IPs and showing us again what it means to really experience an awesome survival horror game. I wanted to take a few moments and remember some of their great games and have a personal goodbye to the studio from me to them. Visceral was responsible for the movie tie-in game for The Lord of the Rings Return of the King. I loved this game as a kid because I felt like the game did a really good job of capturing the action from the films. And even better, in Return of the King, they got Ian McKellen to come in and narrate the story to the game. And that's always a plus, is having Ian McKellen there. The game built off of the previous game, The Two Towers, and added the ability to then be able to play the full game in two-player co-op. And whenever a game has split screen or same screen co-op options, I'm always very happy with that, because that's how I played a lot of my games as a kid. Is I would have friends come over and we would play different story modes or different games, split screen or same screen, and here it was just great. The gameplay was kind of like playing a fun beat 'em up type game, but with your Lord of the Rings characters. The game had light RPG progression where you could increase your health or buy new combos to use on enemies. The game was really hard too, but a lot of fun, and it had some really awesome cutscenes. So they would show footage from the films, and you would see a lot of you're like, oh, okay, I remember that in Fellowship, oh, I remember that in Two Towers. And then what would be awesome is at a moment, it would transition into like CGI cutscene, and then you would be right into the gameplay. And I thought this was really cool. Like that, back in the day, I'm like, oh, this is seamless. I love how they did this. I remember playing it and being like, Mom, you gotta look at this transition. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. Now, after Return of the King, they did a more traditional turn-based RPG set in the Lord of the Rings trilogy called Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. And the game, it followed the plot of all three films. So you basically got to play through all three films in one game, but you were playing as different characters with a story that was going on at the same time as the trilogy, and then that story would then connect at different points in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. I thought this was really cool because at certain points you would meet up with different characters, and what was nice is instead of having voice actor sound-alikes like the movie counterparts, they would actually take clips from the film and then insert it into the game so that you would get the authentic Aragorn or the authentic Gimli. And at sometimes it did feel a little out of place because the audio was recorded at a different time for a different thing, but at the same time I did appreciate the fact that they were trying to keep it authentic. And then again, Ian McKellen returned, and what was really nice is, yes, he narrated the whole story, but at the same time you would get these nuggets of extra exposition of what was going on or what was going on in the world, and he would narrate those too. So if you love Ian McKellen's voice, I mean, that game is for you. The gameplay and the progression, it was very traditional in that if you played any of the old school Final Fantasy games, you'd be right at home here enjoying this game. It's just set in the Lord of the Rings universe. One big thing I want to note that I feel like Visceral did a great job with is not only at the time when they made these Lord of the Rings games did they nail the look of Lord of the Rings, like the films, but they also use the licensed music, which is great because, I mean, if you have the license for the movie to then make a game, use the music for it, especially with Lord of the Rings because it has such a rich soundtrack. It's something I actually have an issue with the recent Shadow of Mordor, is just, why don't they use the music from the films? Like, you have the movie license. Use that music, it's really good. Now at the same time, so they were making these Lord of the Rings games, but they also dabbled in the James Bond franchise. And at this time, Pierce Brosnan was the Bond for right then. And I really enjoyed Pierce Brosnan. I think he's one of the best Bonds. And they did Agent Under Fire, which was a fun game. It was an original game, and they captured the likeness of Pierce Brosnan, but he didn't come and do the voice for the game. It was fun. The gameplay's a bit dated because it relies a lot on an auto lock for first-person shooting, but the vehicle stages are still really a lot of fun to do, and you get some really excellent Bond moments from them. So a fun game, but I feel like Visceral really nailed James Bond and James Bond as a character in Everything or Nothing. This was a Bond game, in my opinion. I think it blows GoldenEye out of the water, and I feel like it's definitely the best Bond game that has ever been made. First off, with Everything or Nothing, what was great is that it was an original story again, but what was awesome is they really made it as like, oh, this is like the Pierce Brosnan movie that was never made into a movie, but we made it into a video game. Because you get Pierce Brosnan, they get his likeness, and they get his voice this time. And you get Willem Dafoe as the bad guy, and plenty of other Hollywood stars that come into voices. I mean, they go all out. It felt like an authentic Bond film. And better yet with this game is they took an action-adventure approach to the game. So you would play a lot of different levels, but what made it really great is, unlike in many other James Bond games, where they would regulate James Bond to being a first-person shooter or something of that type, which in my opinion, I feel like that does a huge disservice to James Bond. He isn't somebody who just goes around and shoots everyone. He's got a lot of variety to his character, how he will interact with situations. And what's nice is sometimes he may shoot people, sometimes he may fist fight, sometimes he may get into a car chase, or he'll grab a helicopter, or he'll be sneaky. Or one of the coolest things is, and I feel like the game, it just did a fantastic job with this, is there's a point within Everything or Nothing where you're trying to gain the favor of the bad guy. You're trying to get in with him, get in with his crew. And what's nice is you have to then participate in a regular car race. And what's cool is it's just a race. You have to do like three laps. But what's nice is it's all about being within character. So it's like, okay, you have to participate within this race, win the race, and then you gain the attention of the bad guy. And that's something he would do in the movies. You know, he would do something like that to get their attention. It was nice to be able to actually participate in that instead of just watch it like in the films. And like I said, with James Bond and the variety, I mean, you get so much with this game. I love this game. You get some really good shooting. They had a cover system, which was not common at the time, and it was pretty good. You get some really good fist fights. You can rappel off of buildings. Those are lead to some really fun, epic moments. You get motorcycles, you get cool Bond cars with the Bond gadgets, you get a helicopter sequence, you get 2 tank sections, and what's awesome is just it really plays into that variety and doesn't just regulate him to a first-person shooter, and I think that's really awesome. So after completely blowing Bond out of the water, they just did a fantastic job with Everything or Nothing. They followed that up with a game adaptation with From Russia with Love. And they kind of took a loose interpretation with it and added some stuff in there. But what was really nice about this game is they got Sean Connery to come in and voice his Bond, because that was one of his Bond movies, and I thought that was just really great. Similar comment to Everything or Nothing. I won't say it's as amazing as Everything or Nothing, but it still is pretty good, and it was nice that they got Sean Connery. Now, during this time period too, Visceral also made a couple games related to the Godfather franchise and did a really good job there too. And then when they switched from Redwood Studios to actually becoming Visceral, that's when they wowed everybody with the Dead Space franchise. So I particularly really love Dead Space because when I started seeing trailers, I'm like, oh, it really looks like Resident Evil 4, but in space, and heavily inspired by, say, like great franchises like Alien. And it really was that. It's like they took different elements from, say, Alien and Resident Evil 4 and kind of made their own thing with it and did a great job with it. I rarely get scared when I play games, when people are, oh, this is so scary, it's so scary. I'm like, maybe. Dead Space, scary. Dead Space 2, even scarier. And Dead Space 3, it does get some flack because of the stupid microtransactions that EA probably made Visceral put into the game. But as an overall, it does have some really fun action. It does move away from the horror, but the action is still good. The first two games though, I mean, they will scare your pants. The enemies in that, you just don't expect some of the stuff that they do. And what's nice is sometimes they'll creep up on you and there's no sound cues alerting you to them, so it just scares you because you're like, oh god, someone could be right behind me and the game isn't alerting me to this. You really have to be on your toes. My favorite is when an enemy went into an air vent and then popped into the next room I went into because I ran away and it started coming at me. That was scary. Overall, those Dead Space games were a lot of fun. They also made an entry into the Army of Two franchise. They did the last one because there hasn't been any entries since then. While not the best story in the world, it did have some fun gameplay and good co-op. That whole series is just fun and silly, and they really should bring that back. But overall, I felt inspired to make this video as this was a studio responsible for many great games that I personally enjoyed. They had a talent in making story-driven games that delivered in both narrative and gameplay. Visceral had the ability to take existing properties and make games that truly captured those universes, along with making a new IP that reinvigorated my love of survival horror. Visceral Games was a talented studio, and now joins the list of other great studios shut down by EA like Westwood and Pandemic. I only hope that the employees of Visceral have luck finding new jobs in the industry and help to bring us new and fun experiences. Visceral, you may be gone, but you won't be forgotten.